Hello and welcome to the Champions League preview podcast from sportsbet.io. My name is Pete Farries. Joining me is European football expert Rob Daly. We're going to talk through all of Tuesday, Wednesday, and now, of course, Thursday's action in the Champions League across three separate podcasts. Do join us for all three. You're here for this Tuesday one. But Rob, before we start, hello, by the way, this is a brand new format, and I'm not sure how I feel about it because I'm old and cranky and I don't like change. Just take us through very quickly how this now works in the Champions League.
Yeah, so instead of 8 groups of 4, there's now one big league and there's more teams. So that would have been 32 teams before. There's now 36. Along with that, rather than playing the same teams a couple of times, you play 8 different teams. So it's a real mix-up in terms of the format of the Champions League to try and revamp it. Maybe it had gone a little bit stale. The same teams were getting through. The next question is, how do you qualify? If you finish in the top 8 places in that league phase, you go straight into the round of 16. If you finish 9th to 24th, you have to go into a playoff round to then play a round of 16 team. And if you finish in the bottom 12 places in the league phase, it means you're out of Europe altogether. So the days of going from the Champions League into the Europa League are gone. The competitions exist in isolation. And it's going to make for a very fluid, different kind of enter a group stage, where we're used to teams winning the group and having a couple of games to spare, etc., etc. It doesn't feel like that. So it's going to be a compelling watch. And I think the list of stellar fixtures that have come out has really won over people who maybe were sceptical about the format in the first place.
And I think possibly a slightly better chance for some smaller sides to go further in the competition as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of how many teams would be paired in a group, say, with Bayern and Atletico, and know that there's next to no chance of getting through, that they'd have to do something extraordinary like win in Munich or win in Madrid, that's no longer the case. And, if you put yourself in a position, even finishing 24th in this league format, you're then just a knockout tie away from the round of 16. So there's some smaller nations as well this year, Slovan Bratislava, Brest involved. And it's going to be interesting to see how they fare. And some teams have got really, extremely tough draws. Even some of the teams that were in pot 1 have got extremely tough draws. So it's going to be, I think we're all going into this in the unknown a little bit, this Swiss format as it's known, and just thinking, what is it going to produce? But I'm really excited actually by that first round of fixtures that we've got, because the Champions League is kind of getting its own dedicated week for the first week of the new season.
Come on, lads, just finish 24th. It'll all be fine. Right, we'll start with the AC Milan against Liverpool, which looks like a phenomenal standout tie on the Tuesday of action. AC Milan 3.75, Liverpool 1.9, the draw 3.75. This is a really interesting game because we don't still know fully what to get from Liverpool, and they, of course, had a bad loss at the weekend. AC Milan have had a very flat start to the season in Serie A until Sunday. This is a really fascinating game, Rob. I'm not entirely convinced I'd back AC Milan to win this.
Well, let's start with Milan then, Pete, because, they finished second in Serie A last season, but they were way off Inter. Let's face it, 19 points behind their city rivals. It led to Stefano Pioli leaving, and he's been the manager there for many years, 5 years total. So a change, Paulo Fonseca, and you're right to point to this flat start to the season. They only picked up their first win under the manager at the weekend against Venezia, and they were convincing. That they blew them away in that first half an hour, scored 4 goals. Tammy Abraham amongst the scorers from the penalty spot, one of the new signings on loan from Roma. But, I don't know what to expect from this AC Milan team at the moment. There's also been notable summer departures like Olivier Giroud heading off to the United States. I think we expected Charles de Ketelaere to not stick around because it hadn't worked for him then. It had gone so well at Atalanta. But there is going to be an air of the unknown, more so, I think, than Liverpool. Because Liverpool fundamentally, yes, it's a change in manager, but much similar principles, yes, much, and we'll get onto this new style of play, the control that they like to have in games. But I think Milan, for me, given they've signed Emerson Morale, Alvaro Morata, Youssouf Fofana from Monaco, feel a bit more of the unknown entity going into this game.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, as much as they absolutely battered Venezia on Sunday, the truth is, with all due respect, it's Venezia. So this is, I think, quite an interesting one in terms of where exactly are AC Milan standing. And so far, I'm not massively impressed, I have to say. Liverpool lost to Forest, obviously, the first time Forest have won at Anfield since, I think, the dawn of time. Arne Slot was talking about how poor they were at keeping possession, how bad their passing was, and of course, when your entire game is based on control, that's really going to hurt you. Are we expecting this to be an important tournament for Liverpool, which is a silly question in many ways because it's the Champions League, right? But the sign of Liverpool's progression since Jurgen Klopp left will come more surely in the Premier League, won't it?
I mean, you're right to mention how notable that win was for Forest. First win since 1969, of course, when dinosaurs did roam the earth, at the very dawn of time. But look, it's massive for Liverpool, and I'll put it in the context of having not been in the Champions League last year. I mean, I was on commentary for the game at the weekend. I'm actually covering this game on Tuesday night, and being back in this competition, is the base level focus for Liverpool. So, the fixtures aren't, the round of fixtures aren't too bad. But this is a massive game for them, a rematch, of two of the best, certainly one of the best European Cup finals, if the best European Cup final of all time in 2005. But there's lots of unknown elements to them. I think there were some component parts of that performance of the weekend against Forest, so they just couldn't find a way through. He decided to then move Trent Alexander-Arnold into midfield and rejig things around in the second half, and they completely fell to pieces. But I think Arne Slot's learning all the time about this group of players. He wanted to see what Alexander-Arnold looked like in midfield, what it did to his team, and I think ultimately he wouldn't have liked it very much. Another sort of interesting subplot going into this game is that we haven't seen Federico Chiesa yet. So Chiesa has had a few training sessions, I think 3 or 4 with his teammates back from international duty, going back, as a former Juventus player to the home of AC Milan. But he wasn't in the matchday squad at the weekend, so I wondered just how match fit he is and if he'll play. The other interesting thing in terms of people looking at this market, I think, is what is Arne Slot's team selection going to be? And he touched upon this at the weekend. He said, when I've been at he was saying, with all due respect to Feyenoord and AZ in a sense, I've never rotated ever, basically. I don't rotate. I've never had to really do it because, there hasn't been that level of competition. He's not used to this relentless level of the Premier League. And he says, I'm going to have to adapt. So what is he going to do? Is he going to start Jota, Diaz, Salah, McAllister, Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, the team he's played, the usual back four, in this game? Maybe off the back of the Forest defeat, he'll feel like he'll have to. But again, some unknowns for Liverpool.
And I really like the way that Arne Slot's been talking post-match as well, almost like these sort of tactical breakdowns at the end of every match and talking about what his opponents do well and what they try to counter. I think so far, I've been impressed by him, even if they lost to Forest. And, like I said, since the dawn of time, which is why I left my teaching job. Over 2.5 goals, by the way, if you fancy that, 1.62. I can see a fair few goals in this, Rob, I
can too. I mean, the way Forest played it, and I wonder if this is an early blueprint. By the way, that AC Milan might take something from, because you're right to point out that the win over Venezia will not ease any pressure on Paulo Fonseca in the early days of his tenure at Milan. Is that Forest played extremely narrow. They dropped their wingers, which was exactly the opposite of what Arne Slot thought he was going to get. He admitted that before the game. So Forest played lots of central midfielders, packed the middle of the pitch, made it difficult for Liverpool to play through there. And as they edged their way into the game, 30 minutes to go, right, let's bring on Elanga, Hudson-Odoi, bang, bang. They linked up for the goal and they were a threat. So maybe a bit of a template for AC Milan, although it's hard to imagine a scenario whereby a winger like Rafael Leao does not start for Milan, especially after a wonderful little trick to set up Thiago Hernandez at the weekend in their win over Venezia.
Fascinating game ahead then, AC Milan against Liverpool. Let's have a quick brief walk through a couple of the other interesting games on Tuesday, starting with Young Boys against Aston Villa at a ground which I'm not going to risk saying. Young Boys 4.9, Villa 1.64, the draw 4.1. Obviously Villa's heroics, or Jon Duran's heroics at the weekend, are still going to be rattling around. So they've got one of the best managers in the world and proven to be one of the best managers in the world over a long period of time. Villa are 1.64. I think they win in Bern. I really do.
Yeah, and I think they'll take a lot from that game of the weekend. Sloppy first half against Everton to go 2-0 down. Ollie Watkins does what he does for 2 goals, and he spoke post-match about he felt I should have had more. But having 2 centre forwards of this caliber for Aston Villa going into the difficult cycle of Champions League football, Premier League football, is absolutely crucial. To not be reliant on Ollie Watkins at this point, to have gone into games already this season where the media, fans have said, look, drop Ollie Watkins. It's okay. We can do it. We've got John Duran. And his goal was, absolutely mind-blowing to win the match against Everton. I've been so impressed with him. And I've been impressed with Villa. Look, their record reads 3 wins, 1 defeat in the Premier League. Yeah. But that defeat against Arsenal, one of the best teams in Europe, was perhaps a misleading one. That Villa on another day would have won that match had they been a bit more ruthless, had David Raya not been so good, and there'd been a bit of misfortune and inaction at the back to allow Arsenal in. But I think Villa have started extremely strongly. I like the signings they've made. They feel a bit better equipped to deal with the duality of Premier League and European football, even more so than they were last year, I think.
And young boys as well have a number of injuries going into this game as well, which is going to cause even bigger problem for them. I think Villa win this. There's a chance they could concede, Rob. I mean, they've conceded a few already in the Premier League.
They certainly have. And, young boys, I was speaking to someone who covered their playoff tie with Galatasaray. So that's who they beat in the Champions League playoffs to reach the league phase. And he was so impressed with them. So dynamic and quick and threatening. They won that 4-2 on aggregate. They won 4-2 in the league at the weekend. It perhaps hints to a vulnerability, a defensive vulnerability at the back. But for young boys, this game being at home, I think it's also quite important given the nature of the games they've got to play, because they have to play Barcelona, Inter, Celtic, Stuttgart. They've got tough matches. So they'll be looking to get to a good start. Not that Villa are an easy proposition either.
No, but if you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, Villa are at the easier end of what you've got, then you've got a heck of a you've got a heck of a draw.
A heck of a draw. Well, that's what happens if you're in one of the top 4 teams.
Yeah.
Or you get a tough draw.
Let's move on now to Bayern Munich against Dinamo Zagreb. Now, Bayern obviously getting revenge for that embarrassing cup defeat a couple of years ago, absolutely obliterating Holstein Kiel at the weekend 6-1. Dinamo Zagreb, it's interesting with teams like them because they're not chumps. These are not. This is not a really bad side. This is not a really weak side. There's good players in there. They did lose to Hajduk at the weekend. But Bayern, I think, are likely to, and don't quote me here, Rob, absolutely batter them still. I mean, 1.13 in the betting tells you everything you need to know. And Vincent Kompany so far, I think it's fair to say, not doing too horrible a job.
No, I've liked it. Look, in general, was I skeptical about the appointment, and am I still probably? A big leap from relegated Burnley to one of the best teams in the world. But what I do like about Bayern this season is a more proactive approach to pressing the opposition. There were hints of it in pre-season. They've won all their matches so far in the league and the cup, and they scored within 20 seconds against Holstein Kiel at the weekend by Jamal Musiala just robbing a defender on the edge of the box and scoring. And Kane looks like he's working his way back from, the longevity of the Euros, the back issue that he went into that tournament with, banged in 3 at the weekend, scored the weekend before in a 2-0 win over Freiburg. So, and the plethora of attacking options they've got is staggering now. Even Michael Elise got his first Bundesliga goal at the weekend. So a real threat, and Zagreb come into this off the back of a defeat to their fierce rivals, Hajduk Split. So while they've won the league 7 years in a row or something like that, you can't imagine they're in the best place to go to the Allianz Arena.
Now, it could be one for the handicaps. And, I mean, look, it's not particularly expansive to say that Harry Kane might be worth a goal as well. 8-12 in the Champions League last season. And
I like him, Pete. I think he's got something about him, that guy.
I'm gonna shock you here. I think he's a good striker. 8-12 in the Champions League last season. He's going to be short, but as Rob was saying there, has scored plenty of goals in batches as well. So, off the back of a hat-trick at the weekend, Rob, that 2 or more, exactly. That kind of market could be a really good way to go. Speaking of good things, Real Madrid in the Champions League, they've won 15 of the things at this point, which is just a lot. Real Madrid 1.28, the draw 5.9, Stuttgart 9.2. Obviously, Stuttgart coming into the Champions League is huge for them. Real Madrid start to the season, they were a little bit flat at the opener, obviously still coming off the back of the Euros and obviously some of the Copa America action as well. So there were some players that felt they were still trying to get themselves fresh. Since then, comfy wins over Real Betis. They won against Sociedad at the weekend as well. Is this one where we expect Real Madrid to cut loose?
Maybe. I mean, I actually there was something defensively vulnerable about the weekend against Real Sociedad. Sociedad cut them open 3 times and hit the bar and hit the woodwork 3 times. Geraldo Becker really should have scored, and then their 2 goals came via penalties in that game. Inexplicable. handball and an inexplicable foul. So that they, Vinicius Junior took one of the penalties, and Mbappe took the other. I mean, if you're a Sociedad fan, you can't believe what.
I love the phrase. I just love that phrase. Inexplicable.
The double inexplicable.
They're incredibly rare. They're incredibly rare and double inexplicable.
But they were. The penalties suitably ruthless from Vinicius Junior and Mbappe. They're still trying to work out this attack. Mbappe playing at centre forward now for club and country. Vinicius Junior's the designated left winger. There's no moving in that. But they've won that game without Aurelien Tchouameni and crucially without Jude Bellingham. Both are back training. Can Stuttgart cause an upset? Stranger things have happened. I think of Shakhtar winning at Real Madrid in the Champions League, a few years back. But despite Stuttgart winning at the weekend and Denis Undav scoring, he's looking really, really sharp. Germany international Demirovic got a couple of goals. They've lost Serhou Guirassy, who was kind of their key man last season, to Dortmund. I can only, in truth, for the first meeting of these sides, I can only really see a Real Madrid win.
Stuttgart have been scoring a lot, though, at the start of this season. Sebastian Hoeneß must be at least pretty happy with that, even if they're not always getting the results. 3 away at Mönchengladbach, 3 in the draw against Mainz as well, obviously beaten 3-1 by Freiburg.
Yeah.
And we just mentioned Real Madrid's defensive frailty against Sociedad. There is a chance for both teams to score here, I think.
I actually like that, Pete, now as you're saying it in real time because of that threat, especially Denis Undav, because he's playing well for Stuttgart and for Germany. So he's riding high at the minute. So yeah, I absolutely go along with that. And but I can't say anything other than the Real Madrid victory because the best team in the world have added maybe the best striker.
Yeah,
in the summer in Kylian Mbappe, 48 goals in 73 Champions League games. So they're just still they're the team to beat. Let's face it, they're the team to beat in Europe.
And really, I mean, a 16th Champions League title is not beyond them. They've got one of the best managers of all time. It's a pretty decent mix. Elsewhere, by the way, of course, on Tuesday...
I like them, Pete. I like them.
Do you like them more than Harry Kane? Anyway, Juventus take on PSV elsewhere. Sporting Lisbon take on Lille as well. It's a really interesting Tuesday of Champions League action. Don't forget, you can get involved in all of it with sportsbet.io.